The room fell silent after the initial screams, leaving only the sound of the storm raging outside. Lightning continued to flash through the cracked windows, illuminating Omadon's transformed figure in eerie bursts of light. Her shimmering tail flicked nervously as she floated just above the ground, hovering between her human world and the waterbound existence she had fought so hard to keep hidden. Fo stood frozen, the empty bucket still in her hands. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mix of shock, horror, and, finally, realization. The consequences of what she had done hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't just revealed Omadon's secret, she had unleashed something far more dangerous, something no one could have predicted. Omadon's eyes locked onto Fo, her gaze burning with anger and betrayal. Her breath came in sharp, ragged bursts, and as her fury grew, so did the intensity of the storm outside. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, and the very walls seemed to close in around them, as if the school itself was responding to Omadon's anger. "You don't know what you've done." Omadon's voice echoed, unnatural and otherworldly. It was as if another being spoke through her, a being of power and ancient magic, a voice that belonged to the river goddess who had blessed her. Fo dropped the bucket, taking a step back. I didn't mean," she stammered, but her words caught in her throat. She had never seen anything like this before, and all her petty jealousy and malice evaporated in the face of the terrifying reality she had caused. Omadon advanced toward her, her tail shimmering with each movement. The colors of the scales shifted and rippled like a reflection on water, mesmerizing yet terrifying at the same time. "You think this was some game? That you could humiliate me and get away with it?" she demanded, her voice shaking with emotion. "You've exposed me to the world. You've put my life in danger." The other students huddled by the door, terrified but too shocked to leave. They had been cruel to Omadon, jealous of her brilliance and beauty, but now they could only stare in awe and fear at what she truly was. Fo fell to her knees, trembling. "I didn't know. I didn't know what you were," she cried, tears streaming down her face. The arrogance and cruelty that had defined her seemed to melt away, leaving only a frightened girl who had unleashed something she couldn't control. Omadon stopped just in front of her, her anger mixing with a deep sadness. "None of you ever tried to know me," she whispered. "You only saw what you wanted to see." Her voice softened, and for a moment, the storm outside seemed to calm. She glanced around the room at the faces of her classmates, all of them paralyzed with fear and confusion. They weren't just afraid of her, they were afraid of what they didn't understand. And then, from the back of the room, a voice cut through the silence. "Omadon." It was Caleb. He had arrived late, having rushed to the scene after hearing about the chaos in the classroom. His face was pale, and his eyes were filled with regret and guilt. He had known Fo was planning something, but he hadn't known it would come to this. He stepped forward cautiously, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Omadon, please," he said softly. "This isn't you. You're not like this." Omadon turned to face him, her anger still simmering, but the sight of Caleb brought back a flood of emotions. She remembered the time they had spent together, the fragile friendship that had blossomed between them. Even though he had been part of Fo's cruel plan, he had told her the truth. He had tried to stop it before it was too late. "You were part of this," Omadon said, her voice quieter now but no less powerful. "You helped them." "I know," Caleb admitted, his voice filled with remorse. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But you have to let this go. Don't let them turn you into something you're not." Omadon's heart twisted. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go of her anger, but the betrayal, the years of isolation, the cruelty, it all weighed heavily on her. She glanced at Fo again, still kneeling in front of her, shaking and crying. Was this really the justice she had wanted? The storm outside rumbled ominously, as if waiting for her decision. Then, From the far end of the hallway, footsteps echoed, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Omadon turned her head sharply, and the rest of the class froze in fear. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped into the room. It was the principal, Mr. Dino, followed by several teachers. Their faces were stern, but their eyes were filled with disbelief as they took in the scene before them, the drenched classroom, the cowering students, and Omadon, half girl, half mermaid, standing in the center of it all. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Mr. Dino spoke, his voice low and authoritative. "Everyone, back to your classrooms. Now." The students didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled for the door, their footsteps echoing down the hall as they fled the scene. Only four, Caleb, Omadon, and the teachers remained. Mr. Dino approached Omadon slowly, his expression unreadable. "Omadon," he said quietly, "I think it's time you and I had a talk." Omadon's tail flicked uneasily, and she glanced at Caleb, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, her tail began to shimmer and shift, transforming back into her legs. The glow faded, and soon, she stood before them, looking like a regular girl once again, albeit one with the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Come with me," Mr. Dino said gently, and Omadon followed him out of the room, leaving Four and Caleb behind. In Mr. Dino's office, Omadon sat in silence as the principal watched her closely. The storm outside had quieted, but the air was still heavy with tension. Omadon's heart raced in her chest, wondering what would happen next. Would she be expelled? Would the authorities be called? She had spent her whole life hiding her true nature, and now it had been exposed in the worst possible way. Mr. Dino sighed, rubbing his temples before speaking. "Omadon, I've been the principal of this school for many years. I've seen all kinds of students pass through these doors, but I've never seen anything like this." He paused, looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "You're different." Omadon lowered her gaze, unsure of what to say. The fear of being rejected, of being thrown out of school, loomed over her like a dark cloud. Mr. Dino's voice softened. "I know you're probably scared right now. I don't know what you are or where you came from, but I can see that you're just a girl trying to live her life. And I want to help you." Omadon blinked in surprise. "Help me?" "Yes," Mr. Dino said firmly. "But to do that, you need to trust me. You can't hide this anymore. I don't know how the students will react once they realize what they've seen, but I will do everything I can to protect you." Tears welled up in Omadon's eyes. She had spent so long hiding, so long keeping the truth locked away, and now she wasn't alone. She had someone willing to stand by her side. "What happens now?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Mr. Dino leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully before answering. "For now, we'll keep this quiet. I'll speak with the teachers and make sure the students don't spread rumors. But Omadon, you need to be careful. The world isn't always kind to those who are different." Omadon nodded, wiping her tears. She knew he was right. The world had never been kind to her, and now that her secret was out, she didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. As she left Mr. Dino's office, the weight of her secret still hung heavy on her, but there was a glimmer of hope. Caleb waited for her outside, and when she saw him, she smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but a smile nonetheless. Maybe things were about to change. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face the world alone anymore. And with that, the next part of Omadon's story unfolds. The revelation of her true nature has brought chaos, but it has also opened the door to new possibilities. How will the students and teachers handle this secret? Will Four retaliate, or has she learned her lesson? And what new challenges lie ahead for Omadon as she navigates a world that fears the unknown? As Omadon and Caleb walked down the hallway, the air between them was thick with unspoken words. Caleb's gaze kept flicking toward her, but she couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. She was still reeling from the revelation of her secret, the weight of it hanging over her like a dark cloud. Caleb had told the truth, but the damage was already done. "I'm really sorry, Omadon," Caleb said quietly, breaking the silence. "I never meant for it to go this far. I thought it was just a stupid prank, but I didn't know what you were." Omadon stopped walking and turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and anger. "But you went along with it," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You knew they were trying to hurt me, and you didn't stop it." Caleb looked down at his feet, guilt washing over him. "I know, and I regret it every single day. But when I got to know you, I realized how wrong I was. That's why I told you the truth. I didn't want you to get hurt any more than you already have." Omadon bit her lip, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. It was hard to trust anyone now. Her life had always been filled with secrets, and now that the truth was out, she didn't know who she could rely on. "Just don't expect me to forgive you that easily," Omadon said, her voice soft but firm. "It's going to take time." Caleb nodded, understanding. "I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to make things right." They continued walking in silence until they reached the school gates. The storm had cleared, and the air was cool and fresh. Omadon took a deep breath, trying to clear her mind. She had no idea what the future held for her now that her secret was out, but one thing was clear: life was never going to be the same. As they reached the edge of the school grounds, Omadon stopped. "I need to go home," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb frowned, his brow furrowed with concern. "Do you want me to walk you?" Omadon shook her head. "No, I need to do this alone." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. But if you ever need anything, you can count on me." Omadon gave him a small, appreciative nod before turning and walking away, her footsteps soft on the pavement. Caleb watched her go, a heavy weight in his chest. He wanted to help her, but he knew that it was up to Omadon to decide whether she could ever trust him again. When Omadon arrived home, her parents were already waiting for her. Bodu, her mother, stood by the window, her face pale with worry, while her father, Bank, paced the living room, his hands clenched into fists. The moment Omadon walked through the door, her mother rushed to her side, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Oh, my darling," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We heard what happened. Are you okay?" Omadon nodded, though she could feel the lump in her throat threatening to choke her. "I'm fine," she said, though the words felt like a lie. She wasn't fine. Everything had fallen apart. Her father stepped forward, his face hard with concern. "What exactly happened, Omadon?" he asked, his voice tense. "How did they find out?" Omadon pulled away from her mother's embrace and took a deep breath. "It was far," she explained, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "She poured water on me, on purpose." Bank's face darkened, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. "That girl," he growled. "She's been nothing but trouble from the start." Her mother placed a calming hand on his arm, but her own face was tight with worry. "What did the school say?" Bodu asked, her voice trembling. "Are they going to expel you?" Omadon shook her head. "The principal, Mr. Dino, said he's going to keep it quiet. But I don't know how long that will last. People saw what I am." The room fell into a heavy silence as the weight of Omadon's words sank in. Her parents had always feared this day, and now it was here. They had tried to protect her, to keep her secret hidden, but the world had a way of uncovering what was meant to stay buried. "We have to leave," Bank said suddenly, his voice harsh. "We can't stay here any longer. It's not safe." Omadon's heart sank at his words. Leave, she repeated, her voice small. But this is our home. Bodo looked at her daughter with tears in her eyes. Your father's right, Omadon. If people find out the truth, they won't understand. They'll hate you. No. Omadon shouted, her voice echoing through the room. I don't want to run away. I'm tired of hiding, of living in fear. I just want to be normal. Her father's face softened, and he took a step toward her, his hands resting on her shoulders. Omadon, I know it's hard. But the world isn't kind to those who are different. We've seen what people are capable of. Omadon shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't care, she whispered. I don't want to run anymore. I don't want to be afraid. Her parents exchanged a worried glance, but it was clear that Omadon's mind was made up. She wasn't going to leave. She wasn't going to let fear control her life any longer. The next day, when Omadon returned to school, the tension in the air was palpable. Whispers followed her wherever she went, and the stares from her classmates felt like daggers. Everyone knew what had happened, even if the details were shrouded in mystery. Fa and her group of bullies kept their distance, their usual smug expressions replaced with something akin to fear. Fa's plan had backfired spectacularly, and now she was the one who felt small and powerless. Omadon held her head high as she walked through the halls, refusing to let their stares break her. She had spent too long hiding, too long pretending to be something she wasn't. Now that the truth was out, she felt free, in a strange way. But that freedom came with a price. She knew it was only a matter of time before the world came crashing down around her again. During lunch, Caleb found her sitting alone by the school garden, her usual quiet spot. He approached cautiously, unsure of how to act around her after everything that had happened. Mind if I sit? He asked, his voice soft. Omadon glanced up at him and shrugged. Sure. Caleb sat down beside her, the silence stretching between them. After a long moment, he finally spoke. I've been thinking about what happened, he said, his voice hesitant. And I feel awful, Omadon. I never should have let Fa get to you like that. Omadon didn't respond right away. Instead, she stared out at the garden, her mind swirling with everything that had happened. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. It's not just your fault, Caleb. I've spent my whole life hiding who I am. I thought I could keep it a secret forever, but I guess I was wrong. Caleb looked at her, his brow furrowed with concern. What are you going to do now? Omadon sighed, leaning back against the bench. I don't know, she admitted. I can't keep running from it. I'm a maned. It's part of who I am. But I also don't know how to live with that, knowing that people are afraid of me. Caleb reached out and gently took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You're not alone, Omadon. I'm here for you, no matter what. And I'm sure there are others who would stand by you too. You just have to give them a chance. Omadon looked down at their joined hands, feeling a small spark of hope flicker in her chest. Maybe Caleb was right. Maybe there were people who would accept her for who she was. But as she looked out at the school, the whispers and stares still following her every move, she knew it wouldn't be easy. The storm may have passed, but the battle was far from over.